So, good evening, my dear friends. Tonight, we continue with yet another Dharma talk related to Ehe Dogen. And especially since we have so many newcomers here, Ehe Dogen founded our tradition of Soto Zen in the 13th century at, and his final monastery was Eihechi. And he's also called Ehe Dogen. So another Dharma talk related to Ehe Dogen, who also very much loved to write. And so one of the books that are based on his talks is called Shobogenzo, which means the treasury of the true Dharma eye. And Dharma means the teaching, the Buddhist teaching, the natural law. And I'm so happy to see all of you here. What a surprise. And also, it feels like a special time for me. Fall has begun. Our Precepts class series is wrapping up, except for the final retreat next month. And the preparations for Jukai will also wind down next month. And for those of you who are curious about all these words, Jukai is, some people call it a lay ordination. It means accepting or taking the Buddha's precepts. So during our precepts classes, we studied the book Being Upright by Tenzin Rep Anderson. And I really enjoyed the Dogen verses that he had at the beginning of each chapter. And I could never find them in all the different translations that I have. So yesterday I was digging down another level and I found out that these are actually Tenzin Rep Anderson's translation of the precepts. And I really enjoyed them, and I thought they just felt poetic and yet not too playful, still very much the original intention. So I want to share his translation. The three collective pure precepts. Precept of fulfilling rules and laws. It is the abode of the laws of all Buddhas. It is the source of the laws of all Buddhas. Precept of fulfilling wholesome dharmas is the teaching of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi and the path of practicer and what is practiced. Precept of fulfilling all beings, it is transcending profane and holy and taking self and others across. These are called the three collective pure precepts. And now the 10 grave or prohibitory precepts. Not killing life is not to kill. Let the Buddha seed grow and succeed to the life of wisdom of the Buddha taking no life. Life is not killed. Not stealing. In the suchness of mind and objects, the door gate of liberation is open. 3, not indulging in sexual greed. Because the three wheels are pure, nothing is to be wished for. All Buddhas are on the same path. Not speaking falsehoods. The Dharma wheel has all inclusively turned. There is no excess, there is no deficiency. One complete moistening of sweet dew bears fruit as actuality and truth. Not selling fermented liquor, where nothing can be brought in, That is where everything is inviolable. That is exactly the great brightness. 6, not discussing the faults of others. Within Buddha Dharma, all are the same path, the same Dharma, the same realization, the same practice. So the faults of others will not be discussed and confusing speech will not occur. 7, not praising self, nor slandering others. Buddhas and ancestors realized the entire sky and the great earth. Manifesting the great body in the sky, there is no inside or outside. Manifesting the Dharma body on earth, there is not an inch of ground. Not begrudging the bestowal of Dharma. One phrase, one verse are the myriad forms, the 100 grasses. One Dharma and one realization are all Buddhas and pioneers. There has not been begrudging. 9, not being angry. Neither withdraw nor set forth, neither real nor unreal. Here are oceans of illuminated clouds, the oceans of magnificent clouds. Not disparaging the triple treasure. The body is manifested. The Dharma is unfolded, and there is a bridge in the world for crossing over. The virtue returns to the ocean of all-knowing wisdom. They are unfathomable and should be received with devotion and respect. For all friends doing jukai this November, these words have a different and yet the same meaning. Because during jukai, we volunteer to bind ourselves to these words, to these vows. This is a big step in life. It is koan practice. It is body practice. Nothing is left out. In particle physics, the search for the irreducible core of matter yields only a seemingly endless proliferation of parts. The more closely you look at the parts, the less easily they can be found. They seem to be indeterminate and relative to the very act of our looking. While on a gross level we can distinguish one thing from another, on a refined level, no thing is actually findable. Similarly, the more closely you look into your own conduct and the conduct of others, the less you will find a me to be right or a you to be wrong. And the less you will find a right, a wrong, a good, a bad, a me, and you. There is only the wide, true, and deep effort to be effectively kind beyond moral judgment and discrimination. That last paragraph I stole from somewhere, but I can't find the source any longer. So kudos and credit to whoever wrote it. It is a way of rising up to meet the oneness, the non-duality of life. If we do think in terms of one and not two, how can we think about breaking precepts? Maybe it is remembering wise words are received when I needed them. And those words are, if it is without love, it is not the precepts. We also need to recall how we are so profoundly tied up together, how our lives are each completely interdependent. We are more intimate than words can ever convey. We are all relative, we are all family, beautiful and loving, and sometimes dysfunctional. Now that I have said, if we don't do think in terms of one and not two, how can we think about breaking the precepts? I ought to add the other part. Yes, we do break the precepts. We break the precepts all the time. Sometimes we stick too closely to the literal meaning of the precept. And at other times, we stray too far. And yes, sometimes I stick close to the precepts because my mind is grasping for the appropriate action, the appropriate response. And sometimes all I can do is grasp for the rules that are presented in precepts. Rules, reminders. We usually don't need reminders not to kill, but how easily does gossip sneak into our conversation? And of course, the literal meaning is important. Sometimes our interpretation of the compassion aspect of a precept may be wrong. We are off what it means to be compassionate. And we need to see that abiding by the compassionate view of the precept is essential. So, therefore, following the precept is not always our way. We need to understand the precept. And yes, sometimes we do miss the point. Last, I want to bring up is the ultimate meaning, which touches on a deep understanding of precepts. A superficial understanding of the ultimate level can be harmful to practitioners. It needs a solid grounding in the literal and compassionate levels first. Yes, the cup is already broken, the water is already spilled, but it does not mean using a baseball bat to interact with fine crystal. I feel very fortunate because over the years, I've been given the privilege to look at the precepts together with fellow practitioners during our precept classes. Teaching this class is a wonderful privilege. In the class announcement, it said last year that I'm one of the teachers. However, I prefer to say we're exploring precepts together. There has not been a single year where I have not been deeply moved by the incredible sincerity and wisdom of the class cohort. This exploration totally brings our lives and hearts and experiences to the table. Speaking for myself, it feels raw, it feels vulnerable, exposed. It is an offering to the community by all the participants. Well, another thing that happens before jukai is that practitioners sew their own Buddha's robe. For some, it's kind of large and looks like this, and for others, it looks more like a bib. My partner calls it your Buddha bib. So this is called okesa, and the smaller ones are called rakasu. And It's the same. It's a manifestation of Buddha's robe. Dogen wrote extensively about the symbolic importance of Buddha's robes, particular in the Shobogenzo. So okesa or kesa is short form in Japanese, or kashaya, which is the original Indian word. They hold deep significance in Zen practice for Dogen. He viewed them not just as garments, but as expressions of the Buddha's teaching and even the Dharma itself. He saw them as more than simple clothing. They symbolized the entire Buddhist tradition and the practice of the teachings. For Dogen, wearing the okesa represented embodying the Dharma in one's daily life. In the fascicle, the essay, Kesa Kudoku, the merit of the Kesa, he writes that the okesa is the robe of liberation and the field of merit, that the robe is an outward manifestation of an inner realization of Buddha nature. Dogen emphasizes the importance as of maintaining the tradition of wearing the robe as a way to honor and remain connected to the Buddha's original teachings. He felt that it was an essential part of being a true disciple of the Buddha. In his writings, Dogen talks about how the act of sewing, receiving, and wearing the robe is in itself a form of spiritual practice. We all wear the same robes, simple fabric, simple thread, and a whole lot of work. The Buddha's robes symbolize simplicity and detachment from worldly desires. In the Buddha's time, monks were basically allowed only a small number of garments, and the okesa was a huge functional part of it. The okesa is intentionally humble and plain, meant to represent renunciation of luxury and attachments. This aligns very much with the life of simplicity and mindfulness in every aspect of living that Dogen spoke so much of. The simplicity of the robe is a reminder to live without material wealth or status. In Shobogenzo Keisa Kodoku, he suggests that wearing the robe is the same as wearing the Dharma itself, and thus it is a way of realizing enlightenment. Respecting the robe and continuing the tradition of the Okesa was important for Dogen. He spoke of his experiences in China when he first found the true meaning for himself of those garments. Wearing the robe is a form of embodying the Buddha's teaching in both an internal and external sense. In our lineage in Zen practice, particularly the tradition of sewing the okesa and rakusu, was introduced to America through several prominent Japanese Zen teachers who established Zen centers in the West. These teachers brought the practice of sewing robes as an integral part of Zen training. And it is to this day like this in our Soto Zen tradition in the United States. I'm now quoting from a lovely Dharma talk that Ben Conley gave about sewing. He's the Ben Conley of the grass hut and Vasubandhu's verses. Since 1971, when Tomoe Kadagiri became the first person to teach the hand sewing of Zen ropes in the United States, countless priests and lay people have dived into this deep and transformative practice. It is now central to most American Soto Zen rites of passage and is the main mode of practice for many devoted students and teachers. Tomoe and the late Blanche Hartman, former abbess of San Francisco Zen Center, are widely considered to be the great matriarchs of American Zen sewing. It is an ancient tradition which is no longer widely practiced in Japan. The robes are generally purchased, but in 1971, Eishun Yoshida, a Nyoho-e teacher and abbess of Kaizenji Temple in Japan, was visiting the US and encouraged Shunryu Suzuki and his assistant Dainin Kadagiri to begin the practice in San Francisco Zen Center. Their students and teachings have been central to its spreading for the past 50 years. Kadagiri asked his wife Tomoe to learn Nyoho-e from Yoshida. There was no time to lose, as no one in the US knew how to teach the practice, and Yoshida would return to Japan in a week. Tomoe dove into studying under the master's tutelage. The training was intense and nonstop, kneeling on the ground in the Japanese style to work with fabric and thread. After the first day of studying with her, I could barely walk, Tomoe recalls. Sewing the okesa, a full body robe, and the rakasu, a small version of the okesa that is worn hanging around the neck like a bib, is done with meditative concentration. Generally, people sew a rakasu to prepare for initiation and an okesa for ordination. The sewing is done with only necessary speech, totally focusing on the task at hand. When I first studied with Tomoe, she taught me deep respect for the practice, with each stitch, we take refuge in the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. End quote. Shunryu Suzuki was, of course, one of the very influential figures in bringing Soto Zen to the United States. He founded the San Francisco Zen Center and established Tassajara Zen Mountain Center, the first Zen monastery in the West, in Green Gulch. And this was the introduction of the practice of sewing the rakasu and okesa to Suzuki Roshi students, teaching that sewing these robes was a vital part of our practice from now on. His students, including ordained priests and lay practitioners, began to engage in sewing robes as part of their commitment to the Dharma. Suzuki Roshi's direct teachings and legacy were key in establishing the tradition of rope sewing in American Zen communities. So Dogen speaks highly of the kesa, considering it the direct expression of enlightenment. It is both the garment worn and a symbol of compassionate mind. Immense spiritual merit comes from wearing the okesa, which connects practitioners with the lineage of the Buddhas and the Dharma. So now we have two options. Number one is I'm going to use the time left over to engage through a format we developed during our reading Dogen studies. I would read a short passage from Dogen Shobogenso about the Okesa, and everybody just brings up what comes up for them around those passages quoted, or what it brought up, what they're thinking about it. Or we can engage in a larger discussion right now. Who wants reading of passages and discussion? Who wants free conversation? All right, you're outvoted. They outnumbered you. So the power of the robe, Kisakokudo. Kashaya has been called the garment of emancipation. The hindrances of actions and defilements and the effects of unwholesome actions are all removed by it. If a dragon obtains a small piece of kashaya, it can be cured of all diseases. If an ox touches a kashaya with one of its horns, its past wrongdoings disappear. When Buddhas attain the way, they always wear a kashaya. Know that its power is unsurpassable and most venerable. End quote. Yes, Vezela.
You feel a little confused by this kind of veneration of the robe as if it's something beyond or supernatural or awe-inspiring, because what I've heard is the original tradition is to sew the robes out of rags, an act of humbleness, modesty. You know, the rags of just being human. So that's so juxtaposed. What's the word? Juxtaposed.
Yep.
Juxtaposed to those words you just read, and it just leaves me feeling a little like.
Of course, he says somewhere else, when you take refuge, you know, when your heart takes refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, how can you wear anything else but a kashaya? So it's not the piece of clothes that he's talking about. Um, yeah. And it's not, so it's not the fabric, it's not the threads, it's not the sewing, it's somewhere else he says basically when you take jukai, you're wearing Buddha's robe no matter what you wear. So it's yes, we venerate these clothes. When I enter the Dharma hall carrying my okesa, I carry that eye hide and all those things that uh, become like second nature. But I'm no less a practitioner when I'm wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt. And when so it's not necessarily the clothing or wearing it, but it is your attitude of putting on the okesa.